The boardroom felt like a tomb. 20 investors sat around the massive oak table, their expensive watches catching the light from the chandelier above. I clutched my presentation notes, feeling the sweat on my palms as I prepared to stand. This was it, the moment that could change everything for our struggling startup. Then Jeremy's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Here comes the poor girl's pitch. Let's hope investors don't mind charity." The words hit me like a slap. Two of my colleagues snickered, and I felt my throat close up. My face burned with shame as I watched the investors shift uncomfortably in their leather chairs. That's when I noticed him. A man in the back corner, older than the rest, wearing a simple gray suit. He slowly rose from his chair, his shadow stretching across the room. The laughter died instantly. Everyone turned to look at him, including Jeremy, whose smirk faded into confusion. The silence was deafening. My heart hammered against my ribs as this stranger's piercing blue eyes swept across the room, landing on Jeremy, then on me. I had no idea who he was, but something about the way he commanded attention without saying a word made my spine straighten. My mind raced as I stood there frozen. Did Jeremy really just call me that? In front of 20 potential investors? My pulse pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I gripped my note cards tighter, pretending the words hadn't cut straight through my confidence. The mysterious man's gaze moved slowly around the table. No one dared speak. Even Jeremy looked nervous now, his earlier cockiness replaced by uncertainty. The projector hummed in the background, but otherwise, you could hear a pin drop. I forced myself to breathe. This was supposed to be my moment, the presentation I'd worked on for months, staying up until 3 a.m, perfecting every slide, every number, every word. Instead, I felt like I was back in high school, being laughed at for wearing the same jeans 3 days in a row. But something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the way the stranger stood there, calm and powerful. Maybe it was pure stubbornness. I'd come too far to let Jeremy's cruelty break me now. I straightened my shoulders and waited to see what would happen next. The man still hadn't spoken, but his presence filled the room like electricity before a storm. "Let me tell you who I really am. My name is Penelope, and I'm 26 years old. I grew up in a tiny apartment above my mom's hair salon in Ohio. We didn't have much: secondhand clothes, coupon dinners, and a car that broke down more than it ran. But my mom always told me, 'Penelope, your brain is your ticket out of here.' I was the first person in my family to go to college. While my classmates worried about which sorority to join, I worked 3 jobs to pay for textbooks. I studied business and computer science, dreaming of building something that mattered. After graduation, I moved to the city with $800 and a suitcase full of hope. I applied to dozens of companies before landing this job at NextGen Solutions, a small tech startup. The salary barely covered my rent in a shared apartment, but I didn't care. I believed that if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, my ideas could change everything. My coworkers came from money. They talked about trust funds and family connections like everyone had them. But I had something they didn't: hunger. I wanted success so badly I could taste it, and I was willing to do whatever it took to get there. It started 3 months ago. In the office kitchen, I was making coffee in my favorite mug, a chipped ceramic one from a thrift store, when Jeremy walked in. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent and a watch that could pay off my student loans. He glanced at my purse sitting on the counter, a brown leather bag I'd found at Goodwill for $12. "Careful with that," he said with a smirk. "Might fall apart before payday." His friend Connor laughed from across the room. Then Jeremy's assistant, a woman named Victoria, who always wore designer everything, whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Scholarship hire." They both giggled like we were still in middle school. I forced myself to smile and shrug it off. "Good thing it's held together this long," I said, trying to sound casual. But inside, my stomach twisted with humiliation. I finished making my coffee and walked to the bathroom, where I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My clothes were clean but worn. My shoes were scuffed. My hair was neat but clearly cut at a budget salon. I whispered to myself, "You don't get to break me." But their words echoed in my head for the rest of the day. 2 weeks later, we had our monthly brainstorming session. I'd been preparing for days, researching market trends and consumer behavior. When my turn came, I pitched an idea for a mobile app that would revolutionize how small businesses manage inventory. What if we created a system that learns from past sales data? I explained, my voice gaining confidence. It could predict demand and automatically suggest reorders. Small businesses lose millions every year from overstocking or running out of popular items. The room went quiet. I could see the wheels turning in everyone's heads. Then Jeremy jumped up, his voice booming across the conference room. Exactly, he said, rephrasing my entire pitch in different words. We need predictive analytics for inventory management. It's brilliant. We could corner that market. Our boss, Mr. Anderson, nodded enthusiastically at Jeremy. Outstanding thinking's in it, Jeremy. Let's definitely explore this direction. I sat there stunned, watching Jeremy soak up praise for my idea. My hands clenched into fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. I wanted to scream, to stand up and tell everyone the truth. Instead, I forced a smile and pretended it didn't matter. But inside, fury burned like acid in my chest. A month later, Mr. Anderson called an emergency meeting. The whole company crowded into the main conference room, and his face was grim. We need to be honest, he said. We're running out of money. We have one shot to save this company, a major investor presentation next week. My heart sank. I loved this job, loved the energy of a startup, loved believing we were building something important. The thought of it all disappearing made me feel sick. This presentation needs to be perfect, Mr. Anderson continued. Everything depends on it. Jeremy, I want you to lead the pitch team. Jeremy stood up, practically glowing with pride. I won't let you down, sir. I have some revolutionary ideas that will blow them away. Revolutionary ideas. My ideas. The inventory management system was supposed to be our centerpiece, and everyone still thought it came from Jeremy's brilliant mind. I'll need a strong team, Jeremy said, scanning the room. His eyes landed on me with a calculating look. Penelope, you're good with numbers. Want to help with the background research? I nodded, knowing I didn't have a choice. But as the meeting ended, I made myself a promise. This time, I wouldn't let him steal everything. This time, I'd be ready. The next week became a blur of 18-hour days. While Jeremy schmoozing potential clients over expensive lunches, I stayed in the office until security guards started recognizing me. I built financial models, researched every competitor, and designed slides that made our projections look like art. Night after night, I hunched over my laptop in the empty office, the city lights twinkling outside. My eyes burned from staring at screens, my back ached from cheap office chairs, but I kept going. At 2 a.m, I'd whisper to myself, if they won't give me credit, I'll force them to see me. I saved everything. Every email, every draft, every research document had my name and timestamp on it. I kept detailed notes about which ideas came from where. If Jeremy tried to claim my work again, I'd have proof. The cleaning crew knew me by name. Working late again, Penelope? Maria would ask as she emptied my trash can. Big presentation coming up, I'd reply, never mentioning that I was doing most of the work while Jeremy got all the credit. By Friday night, I'd created a presentation that could save our company. The irony wasn't lost on me. The poor girl was about to hand Jeremy the keys to success, and he'd probably get promoted for it. On Monday, a group of us went to lunch at an upscale restaurant Jeremy chose. I looked at the menu and quickly calculated that one appetizer cost more than I usually spent on groceries in a week. When the server came around, I ordered the cheapest salad. Jeremy noticed immediately. Don't order too much, he said with that familiar smirk. Poor girl might not be able to afford it. Connor and Victoria laughed like it was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. My cheeks burned, but I smiled and pulled out my own lunch from home, a peanut butter sandwich I'd made that morning. Good thing I came prepared, I said, trying to sound cheerful. They laughed harder, making jokes about bag lunches and food stamps. I sat there eating my sandwich, nodding along like I was in on the joke. But inside something changed. The humiliation was so sharp it felt like swallowing glass. But as I watched them order $70 steaks and laugh at my expense, I felt something else growing inside me. Not just anger, something colder, sharper. Resolve. I finished my sandwich in silence, smiled politely through their jokes, and made mental notes about every cruel word. They thought my background made me weak. They had no idea it had made me unbreakable. The only person who showed me any kindness was Amy, the administrative assistant who managed schedules and documents. She was in her 50s, had worked at 3 different startups, and seemed invisible to people like Jeremy. We started having coffee together in the mornings. Amy was sharp, noticing everything that happened in the office. "That Jeremy thinks he's God's gift," she said one day, stirring sugar into her coffee. "The way he treats people like furniture makes me sick." I learned that Amy had access to everything: meeting schedules, email chains, even draft presentations. She'd watched Jeremy steal ideas before, from other employees who'd quit or been fired. "He's like a parasite," she said. "Takes credit for other people's work, then acts like he's some kind of genius." Amy became my secret ally. She'd slip me copies of important emails, warn me about last-minute meetings, and give me inside information about what the executives were really thinking. "You're different from the others," she told me one morning. "You actually say please and thank you. You remember my birthday. Jeremy's been here 2 years and still calls me, 'Hey you.'" I realized that Amy saw everything, and she was tired of watching good people get crushed by office bullies. She was ready to help someone fight back. 3 days before the presentation, Amy knocked on my cubicle with a stack of papers. "Thought you might want to see this," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. It was an email chain between Mr. Anderson and the lead investor. My heart raced as I read. "We're particularly interested in the inventory management innovation we heard about. We'd like that to be the centerpiece of the presentation." They specifically wanted my idea highlighted, the idea Jeremy had stolen and was planning to present as his own masterpiece. Amy leaned closer. "There's more," she whispered. "I heard Jeremy on the phone yesterday. He's planning to take full credit. He even practiced introducing it as his revolutionary concept." I stared at the papers, my mind spinning. Jeremy was about to steal the one thing that could save our company, and everyone would think he was the hero. The injustice of it made my hands shake, but then I smiled. A cold, calculating smile that probably would have scared Jeremy if he'd seen it. "Perfect," I whispered to Amy. "Let him walk into the trap." Amy raised an eyebrow. "What trap?" I looked at her with newfound confidence. "The one I'm about to set." Over the next few days, the poor girl nickname spread through the office like wildfire. Someone left fake coupons for thrift stores on my desk. Victoria made loud comments about charity cases whenever I walked by. Jeremy started introducing me to clients as our scholarship hire with that same condescending smile. Each comment was like a paper cut, small but painful. I'd go home to my tiny apartment and sit on my second-hand couch, feeling the weight of their cruelty. Some nights, I'd stare at myself in the bathroom mirror and wonder if they were right. Maybe I didn't belong here. Maybe I was kidding myself thinking I could succeed in their world. But then I'd remember my mom, working 14-hour days to pay for my college textbooks. I'd think about every professor who believed in me, every late night I'd spent studying while my classmates partied. I'd remember the dreams that brought me to this city with nothing but hope and determination. In my journal, I wrote, "Each jab cuts deep, but I'm letting them sharpen me instead of break me." I wasn't going to let them win. Not Jeremy, not Victoria, not any of them. They thought my background made me weak, but they were about to learn how wrong they were. I spent the weekend building my strategy, not with rage or dramatic confrontation, but with careful, methodical planning. I was going to beat them at their own game. First, I made sure every part of the presentation I'd created had subtle markers, technical details only I could explain clearly, questions only I could answer. I embedded my research so deeply into the pitch that Jeremy would look like an amateur if investors asked follow-up questions. Then I positioned myself as indispensable without drawing attention. I volunteered to handle the technical setup, to manage backup files, to coordinate with the catering. Jeremy was happy to let me do the grunt work while he focused on big-picture strategy. My new mantra became, "Don't fight them on their stage, build your own." Sunday night, I sat in my apartment reviewing everything one final time. My laptop was covered with sticky notes, my coffee table buried under research papers. I'd built a presentation that could save our company, and I'd done it so carefully that Jeremy couldn't claim credit without exposing himself as a fraud. I closed my laptop and whispered to my reflection in the dark window. Tomorrow, everything changes. The morning of the presentation, Jeremy arrived wearing a $3,000 suit and enough cologne to choke a horse. He stood in front of the men's room mirror, adjusting his tie and practicing his opening lines. "This is my show," he said to his reflection, grinning like he'd already won. "Time to show these investors what real innovation looks like." I watched from down the hall, wearing my best blazer, a navy blue one from Target that I'd bought for job interviews. It wasn't expensive, but it was clean, professional, and it made me feel strong. In the bathroom mirror, I looked myself in the eyes and whispered, "You don't even see it coming." The presentation room was set up perfectly. My slides were loaded, backup files ready, technical equipment tested twice. I'd even prepared additional materials that Jeremy didn't know about. Detailed financial projections and market analysis that would prove I knew this business better than anyone. As I walked back to the conference room, my reflection in the hallway windows looked calm, composed, ready. Inside, my heart hammered with anticipation, but my face showed nothing but quiet confidence. The calm before the storm. The investors started arriving at 9 sharp. They were an intimidating group. Men and women in expensive suits, carrying leather briefcases, checking phones that cost more than my monthly salary. I recognized some from business magazines, venture capitalists who could make or break companies with a single decision. Our entire team sat nervously around the conference table. Mr. Anderson fidgeted with his coffee cup. Jeremy kept adjusting his tie and checking his reflection in his phone screen. Victoria smiled at everyone like she was hosting a cocktail party. That's when I noticed him. A man sitting slightly apart from the other investors, in the back corner near the window. He wore a simple gray suit, expensive but understated. While the others chatted and checked their phones, he sat quietly, watching everything with sharp blue eyes. Something about him seemed different. More serious. More powerful, somehow. But he didn't introduce himself during the initial small talk, didn't hand out business cards or make conversation. He just sat there, observing. I filed him away as probably unimportant, maybe someone's assistant or a junior partner. How wrong I was about that. The room gradually quieted as Mr. Anderson stood to begin the presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Today, we're going to show you the future of business technology." Jeremy stood up with theatrical confidence, his rehearsed charm oozing from every pore. "Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to share some revolutionary innovations that will transform how businesses operate." He launched into the presentation with the smooth delivery of a professional salesman. He covered our company background, market opportunities, competitive advantages. The investors listened politely, taking notes, but I could tell they weren't blown away. This was standard startup stuff, nothing they hadn't heard 100 times before. Then Jeremy got to the centerpiece, my inventory management system. "Now, I want to share something truly groundbreaking," he said, clicking to my slides. "I've developed a predictive analytics platform that will revolutionize inventory management for small businesses." My jaw clenched as I watched him present my months of research as his own brilliant idea. He used my words, my examples, my projections. The investors leaned forward slightly, finally showing real interest. Then Jeremy made his fatal mistake. Looking directly at me with that familiar smirk, he said, "I'll let our charity hire explain the minor technical details." The laughter from Connor and Victoria felt like knives. My face burned with humiliation as 20 powerful investors turned to look at me. But this time, something was different. This time, I was ready. The mysterious man in the back corner slowly stood up. His movement was so deliberate, so commanding, that everyone in the room immediately turned to look at him. The laughter died instantly. "Charity hire?" His voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like steel. 2 simple words that somehow carried enormous weight. Jeremy's confident smile faltered. The room went dead silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming in the vents. Everyone stared at this stranger who had suddenly become the center of attention without even raising his voice. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't explain why he was speaking up. He just stood there, his piercing blue eyes moving from Jeremy to me, and the silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Finally, he spoke again. I'd like to hear her explain it. Those 7 words changed everything. Jeremy opened his mouth, then closed it. Mr. Anderson looked confused. The other investors shifted in their chairs, suddenly uncomfortable. All eyes turned to me. My heart hammered against my ribs, but something inside me clicked into place. This was my moment. After months of being dismissed, mocked, and stolen from, someone was finally asking to hear my voice. I stood up, my legs surprisingly steady, and walked to the front of the room. My hands shook for exactly 2 seconds before steadying. I'd practiced this moment in my head 1,000 times, but the reality was more intense than I'd imagined. 20 of the most powerful people in venture capital were staring at me, waiting to see if the charity hire had anything real to offer. I cleared my throat and began. The inventory management system isn't just predictive analytics. It's a comprehensive machine learning platform that adapts to each business's unique patterns. My voice grew stronger with each word. I clicked through the slides I'd built, explaining the technical architecture, the market research, the financial projections. These weren't Jeremy's talking points. These were mine, built from months of late-night research and real understanding. Small businesses lose an average of 37% of potential profits due to inventory mistakes, I continued, meeting the investor's eyes. Our system reduces that by 85% within the first 6 months. The investors leaned forward, asking technical questions that made Jeremy's face go pale. They wanted to know about integration protocols, scalability metrics, customer acquisition costs. Questions I could answer in detail because I'd built every projection myself. With each answer, I felt my confidence growing. This was my expertise, my work, my moment to shine. Jeremy tried to interrupt, his voice higher than usual. What she means is... The mysterious man raised his hand and Jeremy immediately shut up. No, let her finish. The power in that simple gesture was stunning. Jeremy, who usually commanded every room he entered, looked like a scolded child. His face reddened as he sat back down, his earlier confidence completely shattered. I kept going, diving deeper into the technical details. I explained how the system learned from seasonal patterns, how it integrated with existing point-of-sale systems, how small businesses could implement it without hiring expensive consultants. The beauty of this approach, I said, clicking to my final projections, is that it democratizes advanced analytics. A family restaurant can access the same inventory intelligence as a major retail chain. The investors were furiously taking notes now. Several were whispering to each other, nodding with approval. I could see the exact moment when they realized this wasn't just another startup pitch. This was something real, something valuable, something that could actually change the market. Jeremy sat frozen, watching his stolen presentation slip completely out of his control. The smirk was long gone, replaced by panic as he realized he couldn't answer the follow-up questions the investors were asking. Then the mysterious man spoke again, and the room went silent. I should introduce myself. I'm William Stone, managing partner at Stone Capital Ventures. Gasps rippled around the table. Stone Capital was legendary. They'd backed some of the biggest tech successes of the last decade. William Stone wasn't just an investor. He was the investor. The man whose approval could turn a struggling startup into $1 billion company. Jeremy's face went white. Mr. Anderson nearly dropped his coffee cup. Even the other investors looked impressed. William Stone rarely showed up to early-stage presentations personally. We don't invest in arrogance, Stone said, his eyes moving around the room. We invest in brilliance. In people who understand their market, know their numbers, and can execute under pressure. His gaze landed on me. Miss Penelope Lester, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Miss Lester, if we fund this company, how would you scale this technology? The question hung in the air. This wasn't about explaining existing work. He was asking me to envision the future, to prove I could think strategically about growth and market expansion. I took a deep breath and began outlining my vision. Partnerships with small business associations, integration with popular accounting software, a freemium model that would drive rapid adoption. For the next 15 minutes, I laid out a complete strategic vision. I talked about market penetration, customer acquisition, competitive positioning. I explained how we could capture market share from established players by focusing on underserved small businesses. The investors asked increasingly complex questions, and I answered every one. Jeremy sat silent, his earlier bravado completely deflated. He couldn't contribute to this conversation because he'd never actually understood the technology he'd tried to steal. "What about international expansion?" asked one investor. "We'd start with English-speaking markets, Canada, Australia, UK," I replied. "The small business challenges are similar, but regulatory requirements are manageable. From there, we could adapt the platform for European markets." Customer support infrastructure? Scalable chatbot system for basic issues, human support for complex integration questions. We could partner with local business consultants in each market. William Stone nodded approvingly. Risk factors? Competition from established players, potential economic downturn affecting small business spending, and the challenge of educating market about new technology benefits. Each answer demonstrated that I'd thought deeply about every aspect of the business. This wasn't just an idea I'd stumbled onto. It was a comprehensive vision I developed through months of research and analysis. Stone turned to Jeremy, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You claimed this technology as your own creation?" Jeremy's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. We. It was a team effort." "A team effort you took full credit for," Stone said flatly. "Until we asked for details you couldn't provide." The other investors watched with the fascination of people witnessing a car crash. Jeremy's reputation was being destroyed in real time, in front of the most powerful people in the industry. "Miss Lester," Stone continued, "do you have documentation showing your role in developing this technology?" I pulled out a folder I'd prepared, timestamps, email chains, research documents, all proving that the inventory management system was entirely my work. "Everything is here, with dates and digital signatures." Stone flipped through the papers, his expression growing colder as he reviewed the evidence. "Mr. Jeremy, you're no longer part of any potential deal. Please leave." The words hit like a physical blow. Jeremy's career in tech was essentially over. Word would spread quickly through investor networks that he was a fraud. He stood shakily and walked out without another word, leaving behind the ruins of his stolen success. Mr. Anderson, who had enabled Jeremy's behavior for months, scrambled to distance himself. "I had no idea about the credit issues," he said quickly. "Jeremy assured me he was leading the development." Stone's gaze shifted to my boss, and it wasn't friendly. "You didn't bother to verify who was actually doing the work? You didn't notice that your lead presenter couldn't answer basic technical questions about his supposed innovation?" The rebuke was delivered quietly, but it was devastating. Mr. Anderson's face reddened as he realized his own leadership was being questioned in front of major investors. "If you couldn't recognize talent when it was sitting right in front of you," Stone continued, "I have to question your ability to lead this company through the growth phase we'd be funding." Other investors nodded in agreement. The room's power dynamics had completely shifted. Jeremy was gone, Mr. Anderson was diminished, and suddenly I was at the center of everything. "Miss Lester," Stone said, turning back to me, "you've been working under leadership that didn't value your contributions. How would you handle things differently?" I thought carefully before answering. "I'd create an environment where good ideas are recognized regardless of who suggests them, where team members feel safe contributing without fear of having their work stolen." The investors smiled approvingly. I was essentially describing the opposite of Jeremy's leadership style. After the formal presentation ended, William Stone approached me privately while the other investors chatted among themselves. The conference room had mostly emptied, leaving just the two of us near the windows overlooking the city. "Miss Lester, I want to offer you something beyond just funding," he said. "I'd like to mentor you personally. You have the technical skills, but more importantly, you have judgment. You stayed calm under pressure, you knew your material completely, and you handled that situation with more grace than most executives twice your age." My heart pounded. William Stone mentoring me personally? It was like a fantasy I'd never dared to imagine. "There's something else," he continued. We're prepared to make an offer that ensures you have a significant leadership role and equity stake. Your contribution to this company's success should be reflected in your ownership." Tears pricked my eyes, but I managed to keep my voice steady. "Thank you, Mr. Stone. That means more than you can imagine. Your strength isn't just your technical ability," he said. "It's your patience. You could have exploded at Jeremy months ago, could have demanded credit for your work. Instead, you built an unshakable foundation of proof. Don't lose that quality. It's rare in this business." Walking back into the office felt surreal. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. People who had ignored me for months suddenly wanted to talk. Connor and Victoria, Jeremy's closest allies, avoided eye contact and found urgent reasons to be elsewhere. But I didn't gloat. I didn't throw Jeremy's humiliation in anyone's face or make speeches about karma. I simply walked through the office with my head high, carrying myself with quiet dignity. Amy caught my eye from her desk and gave me a subtle thumbs up. She'd watched the whole drama unfold and seemed prouder than if she'd won the lottery herself. In my cubicle, I found a small stack of congratulatory emails from coworkers who had witnessed my presentation. Some apologized for not speaking up when Jeremy was stealing credit. Others admitted they'd always suspected I was doing more work than I got credit for. The best message came from my mom. "Heard from Mr. Anderson that you knocked their socks off today. Always knew you had it in you, honey. Dad and I are so proud." I closed my laptop and looked around the office one last time as an underestimated employee. Tomorrow, I'd return as a leader. The transformation was complete. That night, I sat at my small desk in my tiny apartment, city lights twinkling beyond my window. The contrast felt symbolic. I was still in the same place physically, but everything had changed. I thought about the journey that brought me here. Every slight, every stolen idea, every moment of doubt had led to this. The poor girl comments that were meant to break me had instead forged me into someone unbreakable. My phone buzzed with a text from William Stone. "Board meeting Monday to discuss your new role and equity package. Looking forward to working with you." I smiled, remembering Jeremy's words from that morning. This is my show. He'd been so wrong. This was never his show, it was mine. I just let him think he was the star while I built the stage, wrote the script, and prepared for my moment. Opening my journal, I wrote, "They called me the poor girl. But I was richer than all of them in the one thing they never understood, resilience." I closed the journal and whispered to my reflection in the dark window, "Know your worth. Wait for your moment. Then take it." The girl who had walked into NextGen Solutions with $800 and a dream was gone. In her place sat someone who understood that true power doesn't announce itself. It simply acts when the time is right.